What if I told you the United States is now carrying more debt than at any point in human history? And most Americans have no idea how serious it's becoming? The national debt just crossed $34 trillion. Interest payments are exploding, and every dollar printed today could quietly reduce your purchasing power tomorrow. But here's the scary part. This doesn't just affect politicians in Washington. It affects your rent, your groceries, your mortgage rates, and even your future retirement. So the real question is, can America actually escape this debt spiral, or are we heading toward a financial reckoning nobody is prepared for? Welcome back to The Dollar Pilot. Today we need to talk about something that sounds boring on the surface, but could become one of the biggest financial issues of the next decade: America's debt problem. Right now, the U.S. national debt has surpassed $34 trillion. That number is so massive that it's almost impossible to visualize. If you spent $1 million every single day, it would still take over 90,000 years to spend $34 trillion. And yet, the government continues borrowing more money every year. Now, debt itself is not automatically bad. Governments borrow money all the time to build infrastructure, fund programs, respond to crises, and stimulate economic growth. The problem begins when debt grows faster than the economy itself, and that's exactly what we're seeing today. Over the last several years, the United States has faced rising inflation, higher interest rates, massive government spending, and slower economic growth compared to previous decades. At the same time, the cost of servicing the debt, meaning just paying the interest on that debt, has exploded. In fact, interest payments on the national debt are becoming one of the largest expenses for the U.S. government. Think about that for a second. America is now spending enormous amounts of money just to pay interest, not even the debt itself. And this creates a dangerous cycle. The more debt the government takes on, the more interest it owes. The more interest it owes, the more money it needs to borrow again. Eventually, this can pressure the Federal Reserve, weaken the dollar over time, and increase inflation risks across the economy. That's why so many economists and investors are watching this situation closely. Now, let's make this practical for everyday Americans. A lot of people hear national debt and assume it's only a political issue, but the effects show up everywhere in daily life. Higher debt levels can contribute to higher inflation, which means groceries, housing, healthcare, insurance, and transportation all become more expensive. This is one reason many Americans feel financially squeezed right now, even if they have decent salaries. At the same time, higher government borrowing can also keep interest rates elevated. That means more expensive mortgages, higher credit card APRs, and more costly auto loans. For younger Americans trying to buy homes or build wealth, this becomes a huge obstacle. And here's what makes the situation even more complicated. The U.S. economy is still incredibly powerful. America remains the world's largest economy. The U.S. dollar is still the global reserve currency. Investors around the world continue buying U.S. Treasury bonds because they're considered relatively safe compared to many other countries. That's why some analysts believe the United States can continue carrying large debt levels for years longer than people expect. But even if America avoids a full debt crisis, there are still long-term consequences. One of the biggest concerns is currency devaluation. Historically, when governments accumulate massive debt, currencies often lose purchasing power over time. In simple terms, your money buys less. This is why so many investors focus on assets like stocks, real estate, index funds, and even gold during inflationary periods. They're trying to protect themselves against the gradual erosion of purchasing power. Now let's talk about something important that most mainstream conversations ignore. Fear alone is not a financial strategy. Every few years, headlines predict the collapse of the U.S. economy. During the 2008 financial crisis, many people thought the system would completely fail. During the pandemic, people feared another Great Depression, yet markets eventually recovered. That doesn't mean risks aren't real. They absolutely are. But history also shows that disciplined investors who stay focused on long-term investing tend to outperform people constantly reacting to fear-based headlines. That's why many financial experts continue recommending dollar-cost averaging into diversified index funds instead of trying to predict every market crash or recession. The reality is that nobody knows exactly what will happen next. Could inflation remain sticky for years? Absolutely. Could interest rates stay higher than expected? Very possible. Could the stock market experience a major correction? Of course. But at the same time, technological innovation, AI productivity growth, and global demand for US assets could continue supporting the economy longer than critics expect. That's why emotional decision-making is so dangerous in personal finance. Instead of panicking, smart investors focus on things they can control, reducing high-interest debt, building emergency savings, investing consistently, improving skills, and avoiding lifestyle inflation. Because whether the national debt reaches 40 trillion or even higher in the future, financial discipline at the personal level still matters more than political panic. And honestly, this is where many Americans struggle today. Social media constantly pressures people to spend more, upgrade lifestyles, finance expensive cars, and chase appearances. Meanwhile, inflation quietly destroys savings in the background. The result is a country where many households look wealthy on the outside while privately drowning in debt. That's why understanding money has never been more important. At the end of the day, the national debt conversation is really about one question: can economic growth continue faster than the debt itself? If growth slows while borrowing keeps accelerating, the pressure on future generations becomes enormous. But if productivity, technology, and economic expansion continue rising, the system may remain stable far longer than most people expect. Either way, ignoring the issue completely would be a mistake. The goal isn't panic. The goal is preparation. Stay informed, stay diversified, avoid emotional financial decisions, and most importantly, remember that building wealth is usually boring, slow, and disciplined, not emotional and reactive.